Number 10. Rage. Rage is a somewhat less known Avenger who, as his name would imply, is often full of rage. After being doused in chemical waste as a boy, his growth was accelerated, quickly turning him into a grown man with superhuman abilities. Rage shows his anger pretty much immediately when he goes to join the Avengers, berating them for being elitists who don't have enough minorities. Throughout his time in the Avengers and the New Warriors, Rage showed his angry side time and time again, particularly when he went out and killed the leader of the Poison Memories gang after they killed his grandmother. But I can't really blame him for that. Number 9. Deadpool. Deadpool hides it really well behind his zany antics and funny one-liners, but he really does seem to be incredibly angry at his lot in life. And while we only see a few glimpses of this, generally in times where he just wants to die, it's pretty clear that he has a lot of anger in there. Plus, if you make him angry, he will stop at nothing to make sure he gets you back in the most gruesome way possible. He holds quite the grudge, going to ridiculous lengths just to get back at someone who just bugged him. So don't get him angry, and definitely don't poo on him. Number 8. Red Hood. This one's a bit on the sketchy side because Red Hood ranges anywhere from villain to anti-hero to almost hero but still too violent to really be a hero. But one thing is certain, the dude is angry. About everything really, but especially about the whole being killed thing. After Jason Todd was killed by the Joker and resurrected, he became less mentally stable and super angry. His anger frequently causes him to lash out against others, often resulting in a whole lot of blood. Even in his more heroic times, you can still see him being angry to the point of sulky, especially when he doesn't get his way. But the guy's still a boss. Number 7. Mr. Furious. Yes, I got another chance to talk about Mystery Man. Mr. Furious is the leader of the Mystery Men and claims to have the power to go into a berserker rage of sorts, with incredible strength and power. In reality, he just goes, rage, taking over, and turns red and has a temper tantrum like when he just bangs on the roof of a car to no avail. While he does show by the end of the movie that he has the ability to fight quite well when someone he cares about is threatened, he definitely doesn't seem to have any real powers. But by golly is he angry and funny. Number 6. Wolverine. Logan is straight up super angry the vast majority of the time. He kind of vacillates between kind of annoyed and I'm going to kill you and everything you care about. And if he enters berserker rage, forget about it. Considering all the crap he's been through in life, it's no wonder that he would be a little testy, but you'd think someone living for that long would find a way to come to some inner peace eventually. Now that said, his anger works really well for the character, so I'm not complaining. Number 5. Rorschach. Rorschach's probably the sulkiest and most jaded member of the Watchmen, and anger might as well be his middle name. He's been described as the Batman of the Watchmen, and that's pretty damn accurate, except he's slightly more violent than Batman. Okay, he's way more violent than Batman. He's disgusted by pretty much any transgression, taking even the slightest ill deed as an affront to humanity. Can't really blame him considering his tragic past, but his strict moral code and quickness to anger has led him to incredible acts of violence, some of which weren't particularly warranted. Number 4. The Punisher. The Punisher basically entered into heroics due to his anger when his family was killed, and his anger keeps him kicking butt and taking names and ending lives. While he is a generally angry person, he's also very quick to trigger and will respond swiftly and mercilessly when one transgresses. If you tick off the Punisher, you know you're in trouble. And not the wishy-washy Batman trouble where you go to jail. Punisher trouble generally means death, so try not to piss him off. Number 3. Ant-Man. Specifically, Hank Pym. Hank was a pretty angry dude. He was super smart and a great superhero, but he was also incredibly insecure, becoming angry when he thought people weren't appreciating him enough. And when he felt that he wasn't getting enough respect as Ant-Man, he even tried taking on other personas, but it didn't work. His anger even caused him to become abusive of his wife, the Wasp. It's really too bad. Ant-Man is awesome and it's sad to see him go so dark, but it did bring an interesting dimension to the character, for better or for worse. Number 2. Batman. I know, crazy, right? Batman may have been your first thought when you saw the title of this video. And Batman shows less overt anger than other heroes since he's so silent and stoic, but his constant broodiness really shows the anger bubbling underneath the dark, black, sometimes nippled exterior. We really get to see Bruce's anger in interactions with supervillains, particularly the Joker, who just so disturbs Batman that he's generally unable to hide his disgust and anger. And the odd time he lets it out is pretty freaking terrifying. Number 1. The Hulk. Whoa, hey guys, did you know the Hulk is angry? That's crazy. Who would have thought that the superhero who gets powerful when he gets angry would be angry? Okay, sarcasm time is over. Yes, the Hulk is super angry. Bruce Banner seems to have inherited his father's anger issues, and after being exposed to gamma radiation, his anger problem became markedly more dangerous. The Hulk has to be on this list because he is by definition angry. If he wasn't, he'd be Bruce Banner. Boom, easy peasy.
Number 10. Batman laughs. There have been a few occurrences where the Joker has forced Bruce Wayne to laugh. One of the most memorable being at the end of The Killing Joke, where it's implied that Batman finally snaps, also in turn snapping the neck of the Joker, potentially. This story is only considered partially canon and is centered around the idea of one bad day being all it takes to turn someone evil and possibly drive them mad, derailing their whole life. Throughout the course of the story, we take a look back into the past of a possible Joker origin, with even Joker acknowledging this might not be his true origin, where the Joker succumbs to the pressures of needing to provide for his family while failing in his career as a stand-up comedian that caused him to get involved in the world of crime. Following one bad day wherein everything goes wrong after he gets cold feet and learns that he has lost his wife and his child before falling into a vat of chemicals, he is reborn as the Joker. Near the end of the story, Batman apprehends the Joker and finds himself laughing at one point at one of the Joker's jokes, before it is implied that he kills the villain, finally breaking. Either that, or they were just sharing a laugh perhaps. But either way you look at it, it seems like the Joker won here, with Batman potentially giving into his own rage, or just his own joy I guess in a way. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please show us you love us by clicking that subscribe button. It really does help us out. Number 9. She-Hulk turns gray. After the death of Bruce Banner in Civil War II, Jen became enraged, and worse, she also was suppressing her emotions somewhat. This caused her to turn gray, also transforming and not even fully remembering everything when the more monstrous side of her emerged, experiencing blackouts as this new more muscular and angry Grey Hulk persona took over. This also likely had to do with the fact that not only was Bruce Banner, her cousin, dead upon her waking up from her coma, but she also had in effect been out for pretty much all of Civil War II, meaning that she was also helpless to interfere or stop it. That would be heartbreaking in a self-loathing kind of way where you feel helpless, and also like the death of someone that you held dear and just crazy events was your fault because you're like, well, maybe if I had been awake I could have prevented that, but I was in a coma. Classic comics problem. Oh boy, I was in a coma, I'm sorry about that. Number 8. Spider-Man goes back to black. When Aunt May's life was in danger, Peter Parker turned to rage. Her being on death's door as a result of a hit gone wrong on him, executed by the Kingpin's men, caused him to don his black suit once more. Although not a symbiotic black suit, I don't believe. After doing so, Spider-Man decided to pay Kingpin a visit after learning that he was the one behind the hit. The hit had been on Spider-Man, Peter Parker, whose secret identity was known at the time, and Kingpin had executed it from behind bars, as he was currently in prison. Spider-Man wore his black suit to the confrontation, but chose to unmask, showing his face as he beat up Kingpin pretty badly. While the rage within him wasn't strong enough to motivate him to kill Kingpin, it was powerful enough to cause him to beat Kingpin to within an inch of his life, warning him that if Aunt May died, he would be back to finish the job. Number 7. Red Hood gives Batman an ultimatum. Red Hood kind of had every reason to be mad, considering that he basically died and was kind of forgotten. But he wasn't mad that Batman never came looking for him. He wasn't mad that Batman couldn't save him. What he was really frustrated with was the fact that Batman let the Joker live, despite the Joker seemingly killing Jason. And honestly, I kinda get that. I mean, the Joker is a criminal who has killed lots of people, and in essence also killed one of Batman's adopted sons, Jason, a kid who trusted him, who was his partner, who was his Robin. And even after that, Batman still refused to take any finite action against the Joker. Red Hood responded by giving Batman an ultimatum. Either Batman lets him kill the Joker, or Batman rights his own wrong and kills the Joker himself. And if he refuses to let the Joker die, he would then have to kill Jason. Batman, of course, opted for the fourth option, typical Batman making his own options, stopping Red Hood by knocking the gun out of his hand and letting the Joker live. Not the option Jason had been hoping he would choose, I imagine. Number 6. Psylocke refuses judgment. And I mean, fair enough. I feel like Kwannon has been through enough throughout the years. She shouldn't have to deal with the Celestial taking Mr. Sinister's side and judging her endlessly, calling her a bad mother. That's pretty rude considering all she's been through. Woman is doing her best out here. This all went down in the therapy session issue of the current Marauders series, which was their AXE Judgment Day tie-in. What I liked the most about this issue was that it focused more on the processing of the idea of judgment, as opposed to what the result of the judgment was. It wasn't about how you were judged, it was kind of more about like how you felt about being judged and what that meant for you. And obviously, Psylocke felt a lot of rage, as, you know, she perhaps understandably should, considering the fact that the progenitor chose to come to her wearing Sinister's face. and then critiqued her pretty heavily. I would also be pretty pissed, I gotta say. Number 5. Cyclops Phoenix turns dark. This one happened during the events of Avengers vs. X-Men. This conflict between the two superhero teams broke out over what the best course of action was in regards to the Phoenix Force, which had returned to Earth. The Avengers believed this was bad, whereas the X-Men believed it might actually not be that bad. It could even potentially be good. Iron Man split the Phoenix Force into 5 pieces, and one attached itself to Cyclops. As the Phoenix Force began to rejoin together, with all of the Phoenix 5 becoming one again, eventually Cyclops was the last one with all the power. It corrupted him, turning him on Professor X, who attempted to talk him down. This was also a rough time for Charles, who was also seen as a more secretive, less idealistic figure after lies he told the X-Men had been revealed. The fight became so intense between them that it actually resulted in Cyclops killing the Professor. Number 4. Superman kills the Joker. Superman also once took revenge on the Joker, killing him dead. At least, he did in another reality. And this was a reality where initially it did seem like the Joker was basically asking, possibly even expecting for this to happen, as he forced Superman through manipulating his mind into hurting Lois Lane, killing her and any chance they had at a family together. Not only this, but Joker and Harley Quinn also worked together to destroy Metropolis, and I believe they also killed Jimmy, Superman's BFF. Superman tapping into his rage would be the beginning of the end for his time as a hero, and he quickly went from altruistic hero to ruling tyrant who used fear and violence to keep those underneath him in check. Number 3. Professor X unleashes his dark side. Professor X is generally seen as an altruistic figure. He dreams of a world where mutants and humans can coexist and live in harmony. At least, that's how we usually know him. But Professor X is also a man with his own secrets, and as such ends up burying deep down his darker side, which he often represses. Until one day, this dark side is released somewhat. This happens after Wolverine has the adamantium pulled from his skeleton by Magneto. The event was so traumatic for the Professor that he could no longer allow Magneto to go on, and ended up simply flipping off the switch on his mind, basically making him brain dead. Number 2. Absolute Onslaught. This isn't where Professor X's story ends though. In fact, this is just the beginning for his darker side. You see, the thing about Professor X is he has a tendency to hide his darkness and lock away his secrets and more sinister instincts, and when he pulled the plug on Magneto's brain, he in essence actually kind of took Magneto's mind into himself. Magneto's consciousness awakens Professor X's own evil side, and the two merge together to create an even more terrifying psychic entity that combines both of their power sets. Onslaught. And Onslaught ends up being so filled with hate and rage that he threatens the existence of all the heroes of Earth. Number 1. Wonder Woman grieves. In Wonder Woman Dead Earth, which is also set in an alternate reality, the mystery of what happened to the planet ends up being revealed through us going back in time to remember that it was actually Wonder Woman herself who destroyed it, in an interesting twist. The twist comes from the fact that Wonder Woman does not actually remember what happened initially and doesn't have any memories and is trying to solve this mystery. She later learns that she was actually the one to have condemned the planet after losing her mother Hippolyta and all of her sisters on the island of Themyscira, who were transformed into mutants after a nuclear strike on the island. This came as a result of the Amazons trying to insert themselves basically into global conflicts in order to maintain peace and prevent war. Needless to say, man's world did not take too kindly to this. Wonder Woman doesn't take too kindly to their response either, and when Superman actually tries to talk her down after this happens, she blames him for not helping her people, and unleashes an untold amount of strength, killing him with their fight decimating the Earth.
In the number 10 spot we have the Hulk. Bruce Banner was the subject of intense psychological trauma at the hands of his father. Dad was an alcoholic who harbored a deep hatred for his own son, and he was physically abusive. At school things weren't much better either, and he had a hard time forming meaningful relationships. Because of this, as the Hulk, Banner suffers from intermittent explosive disorder, an illness characterized by explosive bouts of rage and loss of control. Turning into the Hulk is a way to relieve this, and though it comes with disastrous consequences often, he is actually able to use it to his advantage as a member of the Avengers. Coming in at number 9 is Iron Man. Tony Stark was the star of a 9-issue story arc in 1979 called Demon in a Bottle, which tackled his struggle with alcohol use disorder, an illness that is not only mentally but also physically manifested. After his suit malfunctions, he's asked to step down as the leader of the Avengers and imprisonment. Tony's had a pretty rough go, and turns to drinking to forget. Part of the storyline almost made it into Iron Man 3 until Disney decided to pull the plug on it to keep it more family friendly. Next up at number 8 we have Moon Knight. Because Moon Knight draws his powers from the lunar side cycle, the moon has an influence on aspects of his personality, leading him to be a portrayal of dissociative identity disorder. This disorder was once called multiple personality disorder, and it's characterized by 2 or more distinct personalities that are disconnected from each other and take on their own mannerisms. With Moon Knight, we have Mark Spector, Moon Knight, Stephen Grant, several personalities that take on aspects of Spider-Man and Captain America, and sometimes more. Because of these instabilities, he was excluded from both sides of Civil War. In the number 7 spot, we have Anarchist. Tyke Alakar was a black orphan who was adopted by a white family in Alaska. This caused him to feel a great sense of alienation, and he developed an obsessive-compulsive habit of washing his hands in hopes that he could wash away the dark skin and become white. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is the presence of obsessions, which are invasive thoughts, and compulsions, which are actions used to alleviate the thoughts. As Anarchist discovered his mutant powers, he became even more isolated from society, which worsened his OCD. Luckily, he found an outlet in joining Ecstatics, somewhere he finally felt he belonged. Coming in at number 6 is Firestar. When she was younger, Elizabeth Allen was told that she had an uncle who was a mutant, and this was the reason behind him not being alive anymore. Coupled with the paranoia around mutants in the human world already, Liz became highly phobic of mutants. A phobia is an intense and irrational fear that often leads to aversion. Such was the case when Liz went on a date with Johnny Storm, aka Human Torch, and after realizing he was a mutant, she refused to see him ever again. Then, as luck would have it, she developed her own mutant abilities, so maybe her fears weren't so irrational after all. Next up at number 5, we have Batman. You'd be surprised to find out that Bruce Wayne actually dealt with the death of his parents remarkably well, finding meaning in their death and not forming aversions to stimuli that remind him of that fateful night. Yet in the DC Extended Universe, it's the death of Jason Todd that sent him over the edge. Post-traumatic stress disorder is marked by re-experiencing trauma through nightmares or flashbacks, disturbances in functioning, as well as emotional numbness, anger, and avoidance. All sounding very familiar for DCEU's Bruce Wayne. Up next at number 4 is Daredevil. Many superheroes have tragic backstories, but Daredevil is one of the saddest. He was chemically blinded while trying to save a man from a truck, his loving father was killed by gangsters, and his mother abandoned the family because of her postpartum depression, just to begin with. So it comes as little surprise that Matt Murdock has developed depression himself. During Mark Waid's 2014 run, Daredevil gave us insight into depression, describing it as driving everything good from his life and leaving him numb. He also admitted to contemplating suicide. His numbness to fear has worked in his advantage, however, earning him the nickname of the Man Without Fear. In the number 3 spot, we have Aura. Also known as Alexis Pope, Aura was created by psychiatrist Dr. Vasilis Posios as a way to combat the poor representation of mental health in comic books. Aura has bipolar disorder, a disorder characterized by episodes of elevation and episodes of depression. Because of this, Aura has attempted suicide in the past, she suffers from severe migraines, and she faces prejudice because of her illness. Dr. P is hopeful that her creation will teach audiences to be mindful in the way that they treat those with mental illnesses, and realize that they are not broken people. Coming in at number 2 is Legion. This is a tricky one because David Howler is caught between accepting a mental health diagnosis and just struggling with learning his mutant powers. As Legion, he is a powerful telepath, which may explain for some of the cognitive distortions he faces, but the reality is that the hallucinations and delusions that found him locked in a psychiatric institute can be best explained by schizophrenia, which is exacerbated by his telepathic abilities. Such examples of this are him thinking he's seen the devil, and him being unable to maintain conversations because of warring voices in his head. And finally, in the number 1 spot is Max Gamer. Max Gamer is a superhero kid who is designed for those with Asperger's syndrome, not as a mentally ill superhero, but rather as one with extraordinary gifts and talents. Asperger's is a disorder that falls under the autism spectrum, and it's distinguished by challenges with social and pragmatic interaction. This comic, however, puts a positive spin on these traits and focuses on Max's strengths. Thus, those with Asperger's were able to find a role model in Max.
Number 10. Captain Ultra. Phobias are not explicitly considered a mental illness or a mental disorder. We are all human, we all have fears, and often our fears are good. They help us survive almost as a byproduct of self-preservation. However, these phobias can cause you to have an anxiety disorder if they are severe, like with Captain Ultra, a superhero who literally cannot perform if he is exposed to flames. And I'm not talking giant, terrifying flames either. When we first see him in the comics, he faints at the sight of someone lighting a cigarette. A phobia that severe requires treatment. Captain Ultra wisely does seek treatment, and with the help of Doc Samson, another hero who also happens to be a psychologist with a PhD in psychology, is cured of his fear of fire. Number 9. She-Hulk. Addiction is a dangerous illness. It can consume you and cause you to change your perception of yourself. You go from being a well-rounded person with many interests to an addict, seeking out one thing and one thing only. Addiction can take over your life and cause you to become alienated from others, lose your friends and your family. When you love something so much as you do when you are experiencing addiction, there is nothing you won't give up for that thing. For She-Hulk, that addiction comes in the form of her powers. She won't give them up for anyone. In fact, She-Hulk becomes so addicted to her powers that she also has an identity crisis, wrestling with the perception of herself. She once made a pros and cons style list when it came to her, Jennifer Walters, the lawyer, versus her superpowered She-Hulk self. Ultimately, she has come to terms with the fact that She-Hulk is just a part of who she is, almost surrendering to her addiction, unable to separate her own identity from it. Unfortunately for Jen, this continues to lead her to wrestle with the way others see her. When she starts a romance with Thor, she ponders if he just wants to be with her because of She-Hulk, or if he really loves her. Obviously, she still has some work to do. Number 8. Daredevil. One of the best iterations of depression I have yet to see displayed in the comics comes to us from Matt Murdock. Depression is an illness that can make you feel as though just breathing is exhausting. Just existing feels laborious. It is an illness that Matt has dealt with almost his whole life, and unsurprisingly so. This is a character who has lost multiple loves, both Karen Page and Elektra being murdered by his nemesis, Bullseye. He also lost everything when Kingpin went after him. He lost his home, his reputation, and the secret of his true identity. Beyond that, his mother has also suffered from PPD, postpartum depression. Still, they keep his depression grounded in reality in the comics, and show that Matt refuses to give in to it, working very hard every time he feels trapped in his illness, which he likens to a demon. Number 7. Jessica Jones. After having her mind controlled by the Purple Man, aka Kilgrave, Jessica suffers from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. In the series Alias, we see her character struggling to deal with what happened to her. Jessica has been so severely traumatized by the action she was forced into that she feels as though she lost a part of herself. The lines between her own feelings and choices and what Kilgrave had her do become blurred to her, and she feels as though she is constantly questioning her own decisions as a result. Is this something I actually want to do for myself? Did Kilgrave make me do that, or did I actually want to do that? She disappears within her trauma. For survivors of sexual assault especially, this is commonplace, losing yourself inside your trauma. You question everything as though your trauma is actually the thing in control of your life, not you. This reflection of trauma and PTSD is beautifully articulated through Jessica in Alias when she explains, "In my mind, I can't tell the difference between what he made me do or say and what I do or say on my own. The only reason I know I wasn't in love with him is that I say to myself, how could I be? I hate him. That's it. That's what my sanity is holding on to. How could I be?" Number 6. Wolverine. In order to understand Wolverine's battle with mental illness, you need to start at the beginning. His origins is enough to mess anyone up about 100 times over. We could make a list of top 10 tragic Wolverine origin stories, trust me. From the killing of his puppy by his half-brother, to eventually the death of almost his entire family right as his mutation kicked in, to the death of his childhood love by his own hands, and the death of almost every other woman he's ever truly loved. He has a really messed up past. One that would give anyone PTSD, which is what he most likely suffers from. Like Logan, people suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder often withdraw from others, feeling as though they are alone in the world, and often turn to substance abuse to numb their pain, like Logan with alcohol. Number 5. Hank Pym. A brilliant man who simply let his own insecurities manifest themselves in willful ways, creating multiple personas. Hank suffers from bipolar disorder and dissociative identity disorder. Most recently in the comics, he has been working towards healing and redemption for himself, choosing to reconcile with his problems and even self-diagnosing himself as bipolar. This is an important first step for anyone who is suffering from mental illness, and is particularly important for Hank, whose illness, when it ran rampant, made him into an almost villain as Yellow Jacket, and was not even something he could understand at the time. He expressed remorse for his actions, but would continue to let his illness get the best of him while unable to recognize what was causing this change within him. Recognizing that you have a problem and addressing its source is one of the most meaningful steps you can take when it comes to overcoming your illness. Number 4. Scarlet Witch. Wanda's issues stem from an interpretation by Brian Michael Bendis on how powers this strong could affect someone like her. He was the writer behind the Dissembled storyline, where we really first saw a glimpse into Scarlet Witch's seemingly fragile mental state. Scarlet Witch experiences a psychotic break based around a seemingly insignificant comment about her children, but this is also in the face of everything she has experienced in her entire life. Whatever origin story you choose for Wanda and her brother, they always seem to have grown up poor, hungry, and usually cold. This manifested in Wanda in terms of her seeking love and approval from others, and in looking for someone to take care of her emotionally and help her to feel worthy of love. She continues to pursue this in the comics as an adult, and while she has never been diagnosed with any specific illness, it has been shown that her lack of self-worth has often led to her being overprotective of others, worried that she'll make a mistake and cause them harm. It has also led to her being depressed, as we find out when we discover that Wanda is actually on antidepressants. The sad thing is, while Wanda works to get better in the comics, her story illustrates the lack of responsibility on anyone else's part to help her. The people around her who are supposed to seem to care about her seem to blame and condemn her more than help her towards rehabilitation. A wary lesson for those who suffer from mental illness: surround yourself with those who support your journey to get better, not enable you to the point that you become even worse. Number 3. Moon Knight. Mark Spector is a good example of what can happen when one compartmentalizes their feelings as a result of a traumatic experience. He suffers from a rare but real disorder called dissociative identity disorder, or DID, or as many other people call it, multiple personality disorder. He found out a trusted family friend was a serial killer, has served in the military, and has also been a mercenary. In summary, he's seen a lot of shit. Mark deals with his fears and trauma by hiding in alternate personas. He has a slew of them, in fact, and even goes so far as to live in them long term sometimes. He has also been seen adopting fellow superheroes personas and calling on them in times of need when he feels inadequate, weak, or afraid of what he has to face. Eventually, Mark is forced to reconcile with the fact that Khonshu may even be a delusion, something he has created to help mask his problems and help him avoid dealing with the reality of his mental illness. Number 2. Deadpool. Wade Wilson often acknowledges his own mental instability in the comics. He is a man who suffers from a slew of different issues. He has often been presented as suffering from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. He's experienced psychotic breaks, PTSD, depression, and addiction. He's basically Marvel's main poster boy for superhero mental illness. The part where this kind of goes sideways for us as the audience is that Deadpool is almost a characterization of mental illness, or a stereotype of mental illness, making him not a great spokesperson for his issues, but a great example of how hard it is to deal with your illness when you can't seem to see it. And it is this inability to reconcile with his problems that probably makes him lean more towards the anti-hero than the outright hero. If you want to explore the long list of Wade's mental health issues more, check out Fool Killer issue 4, which shows him visiting Greg Salinger for a therapy session. Number 1. Sentry. Another hero who embodies the struggle between light and dark, much like Wade Wilson but more serious. Robert Reynolds is both the Sentry and the Void. The Void is like an alternate dark persona of Reynolds, a villain who is capable of destroying Asgard single-handedly and tearing Ares, god of war, apart. The Void became a personality of Robert immediately after he transformed and accidentally destroyed the lab he'd broken into and everything and everyone in it. Not wanting to face this dark part of himself, it created a split persona in Robert, and created the alternate dark persona, the Void. This form of dissociative identity disorder stands to represent exactly the importance of therapy in regards to helping you reconcile with your darker side, and not letting it consume you. The Sentry is the epitome of a hero who wrestles with fully accepting himself and forgiving himself, and as such this makes him one of the most tragic and also the most real.